Hi, I'm Rachel Charles from the APAC Political Department, and I'm here today with Congresswoman Stephanie Murphy from Florida's 7th District. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
It's great to be with you.
Now, you have such a remarkable life story. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I was born in Vietnam in the aftermath of the Vietnam War, and my parents had been affiliated with the U.S. military and the former South Vietnamese government. And so as a result, were persecuted by the new communist government. And they finally got to a point where they didn't think that they could raise my brother and I in a country facing persecution and the lack of opportunities and freedoms. And they got on they put us all on a ship and a boat to escape by sea. And we got out to international waters and ran out of fuel. And a U.S. Navy ship found our boat, and they gave us food, fuel, and water, and it allowed us to make it to a refugee camp. And from there, we were sponsored by the U.S. To relocate to the United States.
That's incredible. How did that background kind of bring you to public service?
You know, that experience, as I look back on it, is my first contact with what I think makes America great. And it's this unique combination between power and generosity. It's a power that has sailors patrolling waters thousands of miles from home, but it's generosity that has folks trained for combat decide to extend grace to desperate strangers. And I've always been so grateful for the opportunities afforded to me as an American citizen and an opportunity to live in this country. And so I believe that my family had a debt of gratitude to this country, and public service was my way to try to pay off some of that debt.
And does your story kind of connect you to the U.S. Israel relationship and help you form a connection to the issue?
It absolutely does, both my experiences, both from a professional perspective as well as a personal one. You know, my family escaped persecution and we were given sanctuary. And we are so grateful for that. But I'm always very aware that the Jewish people in the 1930s and 40s were not given sanctuary. Many of them perished. And so it's so important that we have a sanctuary for the Jewish people in the state of Israel. And the U.S. Israel relationship is important in ensuring that safe haven exists. But it's also important because of the national security imperatives that we have as a nation. I worked at the Department of Defense, and I'm very aware of the challenges that the United States has. And Israel has been just an incredible partner in helping the United States face some of those challenges. And I don't see that relationship in a one-way fashion. I think it's a mutually beneficial relationship and one that is really important to the United States as it is to Israel.
I definitely agree with that sentiment. And you had the opportunity to travel to Israel in 2017. What still sticks out as a memorable experience that you brought back to Washington?
Israel is a beautiful country with incredible, kind and caring people. And I had such a great experience there. But, you know, when you're in Israel, you realize that size and proximity matters. And Israel is a small nation that is very close to many of its greatest threats. And I'll never forget sitting on the border with Lebanon and seeing up on the other hillside the Hezbollah villages and where there are missiles targeted at the playground where the IDF officer who was briefing us talked about her children playing. Yeah. And as a mom, that really resonated with me. It made me understand how close the threats are and how important missile defense is for Israel.
And when you came back to Washington, you kind of took on some legislative initiatives. What are you most proud of that you've accomplished?
I'm really proud of helping to bolster the missile defense resources. So I came back and I made sure that the amount allocated to missile defense as established in the MOU made sure that it was clear that was a floor, not a ceiling. And as we have seen the attacks of late, I've been advocating that we go ahead and replenish the resources for missile defense. It is critically important that Israel has the ability to protect her citizens, and missile defense is a key component of that.
So you mentioned missile defense funding. Can you talk about the situation that happened over the summer with the Iron Dome supplemental funding?
Sure. The Iron Dome supplemental funding ran into a snag because there were some far-left members of my own party who objected to it. And as a result, leadership pulled the language out, and we had to vote on it as a standalone. For me, it was such a deeply disappointing experience because here are members of the Democratic Party who purportedly are committed to human rights and value people and civilian lives, who were seeking to deny our ally the resources she needed to defend her civilians against terrorist attacks. And I made my opinion quite clear to leadership that I was disappointed in them for pulling the language, and also my position quite clear that the far left cannot be allowed to interfere with the military assistance that the United States has committed to. This was one of those things, one of those issues that really fired me up, because it just was outrageous to deny our ally the ability to protect herself. That's what missile defense is.
How do you make that case to your other colleagues that might not see it the same way?
I think the good news is that on the issue of U.S. Israel, there is broad bipartisan support. And so I don't know that I will ever be able to change some of the far left's mind on this issue, but I can overcome their perspectives by gathering bipartisan votes. And that's what we ended up doing once we pulled the language out and passed it as a standalone. We were able to overcome their objections by working together with our Republican colleagues and with the Democrats.
Well, thank you so much for your leadership on that issue. Shifting more to peace, you had the chance to attend the ceremony for the Abraham Accords. What was that like? Are you hopeful for new peace in the region?
It was an incredible experience to be at the signing of the Abraham Accords, because it was a moment where you really felt a shift. These relationships with these countries is a step forward for the safety and security of Israel. And while I had a lot of differences with the Trump administration's policies, this was an area that I was really glad to see that they led the charge and were able to accomplish. And now I'm pushing the Biden administration to build on this and to continue to expand these agreements.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. Shifting more to politics, a lot of people feel we're in a deep division and polarization. And as a leading moderate in Congress, how do you navigate those dynamics?
Well, it certainly has been difficult. And I think, the division isn't just between Democrats and Republicans. It's often between Democrats as well. And the way that folks have handled policy differences has become very personal. And I think that that's been a real challenge to have different policy perspectives, but have it manifest itself in threats or other types of harassment. But for me, I try to keep my head down and do my job and not engage in those personal attacks and try to make progress. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that really matters to the American people and to my constituents are the things that I can actually get across the finish line and signed into law. And that takes support of Democrats and Republicans alike.
So you brought it up, the talk of the town is kind of the rise of the far left in the Democratic Party. Where do you see the future of the Democratic Party?
I think that it's really important that the moderate voices continue to have a strong presence within our party. And we'll take, for example, this issue of Israel. The far left in our party has taken extreme positions, and it's been incredibly important for moderates like myself to speak up against that. For example, I guess it was a couple of years ago now, time in Washington is sort of difficult to gauge, but when there were a lot of anti-Semitic remarks made by a member of the Democratic Party, I called for a clean resolution against anti-Semitism. But, was disappointed to see that statement get watered down and become an anti-hate statement instead of a clear statement on this issue. And I think we just have to keep pushing back on this because it is not consistent, I believe, with democratic values, some of the positions that the far left has taken on this issue. I think another area that is important for moderates to have a voice is, it's one of the reasons I've been such a strong proponent that military assistance and military cooperation to Israel not be conditioned, as the far left in my party is calling for. And so there are always going to be these policy differences. The importance is that moderates use their voice, advocate for the things they believe in, because I think we've already seen in the past, history has shown us that inaction is as bad, is being complicit.
We're going to shift to a lightning round of some fun questions.
Sure.
You started Stephanie Scholars. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And what was your favorite book as a child?
Well, Stephanie Scholars is a literacy program that I'm running in my district to encourage young people to read. For me, education, reading, all of those things were the gateway for a broader and richer experience. My dad used to work shift work when we were growing up, and he would get off at 3 p.m. and he'd take me to the library and take a nap while I explored all the bookshelves and read. And then we would go to clean office buildings at night as his second job. And so reading has just been such a core part of my growing up that I want to share that joy with other kids in my community. And my favorite book growing up was Charlotte's Web. I loved that book.
A classic.
Yeah, classic.
That's great. A lot of us picked up what they're calling pandemic hobbies. Yeah. Did you pick up anything that you took on?
Yes.
While you were at home?
I picked up watercoloring. So I've been teaching myself how to paint with watercolors.
Oh, wow. I think George Bush does that.
Yeah, I think he is an artist.
What's next on your travel bucket list?
Well, during the pandemic, my family and I had been getting away to the beach as a way to kind of spend some time together and kind of get away from the lockdowns and things like that and be outdoors. But I'm hopeful that I'll be able to travel with my kids. I'm looking forward to going to New York. They love New York and shows and dinners and things like that. So
yeah, I would be very excited to see a Broadway show.
Yes, I know.
Any last words for the pro-Israel community?
Well, I just would want to say that I hope the community sees in me an ally because I have a deep personal connection to to understanding why Israel needs to exist as a sanctuary for the Jewish people, as somebody whose family was persecuted and found sanctuary in the United States. I think it's critically important. And I also am deeply committed to the relationship between U.S. and Israel. And I hope that the community sees in me an ally who's unafraid to use my voice to speak up and speak out when there are folks who are speaking against the relationship.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you at home for joining us in this conversation.